Back in 2013, a new chapter began when I was transferred from sunny San Diego to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, while serving in the Marines for over 4 years. My goal was clear: to get the opportunity to deploy to Afghanistan, and the preparations for such an endeavor were extensive. If you're unfamiliar with military deployments, they involve months of classes and training leading up to the departure. During my time at Camp Lejeune, I forged a strong friendship with Joe, who was a corporal, while I held the rank of sergeant in my platoon. We became inseparable outside of our Marine duties, sharing barbecues, gym sessions, and even family gatherings. Life was good. However, approximately 4 months into our deployment to the land of never-ending sand, I began to sense that something was amiss. Communication with my wife back home grew sparse, and I couldn't shake the feeling that things were not right. Call it intuition, but I had an extraordinary talent. I could move silently, a skill honed from sneaking around my Vietnam veteran father's home during my childhood. You could say I was as quiet as a whisper, and I utilized this ability to observe something that confirmed my suspicions. One day, as I entered our packed PEB, a big container housing about 8 people, I spotted my wife's face on a video chat with Joe, who was oblivious to my presence until I shut the door behind me. Instead of confronting them on the spot, I decided to bide my time and observe further. The deployment became filled with these covert moments, where I would overhear or see things that only fueled my determination for retribution. Before the mental strain of the deployment began to take its toll, our time in the foreign sands came to a close, and we headed back home. The homecoming was joyous, with the exception of my 2-year-old momentarily not recognizing me. That aside, happiness prevailed. However, it was only a matter of time before we were inundated with classes and screenings back in the States. These included assessments for traumatic brain injuries, mental health awareness, and certifications, which no one could evade. All of a sudden, Joe had frequent appointments or emergencies, enabling him to escape most of the classes or medical screenings that the rest of us had to endure. The feeling that something was amiss persisted, but I wrestled with the internal conflict of whether I was merely paranoid. I began to discreetly tell Joe several times a week, tracking his activities when he left work early or had to make a call. And, much to my dismay, I discovered that his car was parked outside my home every single time. Confronting Joe with my findings, he vehemently denied any wrongdoing and made me feel as though I were unjustly accusing him. Quietly, I gathered all the evidence I could and took it to the battalion sergeant major, who, as the top-ranking non-commissioned officer under the battalion commander, held significant authority. A week later, I was summoned to the battalion commander's office to discuss his findings and decide what action I wanted to be taken. My request was straightforward. I wanted Joe's rank stripped. Justice was served with incredible swiftness, and the outcome was decisive. Joe faced demotion, loss of rank, forfeiture of half a month's pay for 2 months, restriction, and extra duties. Not long after returning to the United States, Joe was promoted to sergeant, but in less than a month, that rank was taken from him. Later, I heard from mutual friends that he left his wife to be with his new girlfriend, who was also pregnant with his 3rd son. For a while, I attempted to keep my marriage together for the sake of my son. However, it became apparent that this was a monumental mistake. A few months after the dust had settled, I received a transfer back to San Diego for a cruise, and my wife and I decided to give our relationship one final chance. As I embarked on my deployment, she chose to fly to Joe's house to spend some quality time together. Upon discovering her betrayal, any remaining desire to mend our relationship evaporated. While on deployment, I met my current wife, and our love story has been a source of happiness ever since. I've found greater contentment than I ever experienced during the trying times of my previous relationship. The moral of the story is quite simple: never betray your best friend by pursuing a relationship with their spouse.
In 2013, my work as a dry liner took me from place to place, typically for short-term stints of about 6 months. This constant movement exposed me to a variety of landlords, some good and some terrible. But one landlord's actions pushed me to an act of revenge that became a memorable chapter in my life. I was assigned to a project at the new Wembley Stadium in London, a long-term job that convinced me to look for a house instead of a flat due to the extended stay. After some searching, I found a reasonably priced house in a local newspaper ad, contacted the landlord, met him, and everything seemed fine. I handed him the deposit in cash, moved into the property over the weekend, and lived there for nearly a year with no significant issues. Rent payments were on time, and I took care of minor repairs without bothering the landlord. As the job at the Wembley Stadium was winding down, I decided it was time to give notice and also offer the landlord a chance to inspect the house before I moved out, ensuring a smooth return of my deposit. I popped by his pawn shop, handed in the keys, and brought up the deposit. That's when the situation took a dramatic turn. The landlord claimed he had no recollection of the deposit and insisted that he had used it to cover supposed damages incurred while I was living there. Incredulous, I asked, "What damages?" I had actually improved the property with a bit of DIY work and decoration, and the house was in a better state than when I had first moved in. In response, the landlord became increasingly aggressive. He boldly declared that I wouldn't see my deposit again and even gave me a shove. As tension mounted and tempers flared, I found myself taking steps forward, ready to confront him head-on. However, in that crucial moment, something in my brain clicked, and I realized I had a better way to deal with this situation. Instead of resorting to physical confrontation, I decided to disengage and take a more calculated approach. Calmly, I uttered a simple "okay, bye" and walked away from the confrontation. What the landlord didn't know was that I had a secret weapon, a spare key to the back door of the house stashed in my van. That evening, I let myself back into the house, intent on leaving a lasting impression on my uncooperative landlord. I spent the night methodically dismantling every bit of wood in the house, carefully removing doors, skirting boards, banisters, architraves, floorboards, and even the kitchen units. My aim was to leave the house in a condition that made it obvious I had taken the structure apart, but without causing any actual damage. By the next morning, my act of quiet, meticulous revenge was complete, and I was ready to hit the road for my next job in Scotland. But I had one final twist in mind. On my way out of London, I swung by the landlord's pawn shop, picked up a spare hammer, screwdriver, nails, and wood screws from my van, and handed them to his confused assistant. With a grin, I told her to make sure her boss understood that he'd be needing these tools. As I continued my journey north, I couldn't help but smile at the colorful text messages and voicemails I received from the landlord. This time, I knew I had left an unforgettable mark, and justice had been served in my own unique way.
Back when I worked as a manager at Wendy's, my job was already far from perfect, but things took a turn when the bonus fiasco began. I was clocking in around 65 hours a week, and one day, I was offered a $100 bonus to sacrifice one of my precious days off. Fatigued but determined, I agreed. However, the bonus saga didn't end there. Before I even received my first bonus payment, I was asked to come in for another shift. Feeling like I was owed more, I requested $150 this time, considering the fact that I had worked tirelessly for 23 consecutive days with no respite. Surprisingly, they accepted my demand, so back to work I went. Fast forward 3 weeks, and I was still waiting for my hard-earned money. I decided to speak to my general manager, who pointed me towards our district manager, promising a resolution. Our conversation went something like this: me, "Hey, any news about my bonus? I should be getting $250 for those extra shifts." District manager: "Well, that's why I'm here. The store has been struggling to turn a profit. This response essentially implied that my performance wasn't up to par. At the time, I was managing the evening rush with only 3 others, my girlfriend, best friend, and another close friend. My argument was simple: we're doing our best, but serving the same number of customers with half the staff naturally increases our drive time. The district manager's next words left me stunned: "That's not a valid excuse, and we won't grant you a bonus until revenue rises and drive times decrease." I couldn't believe it. They were essentially telling me that I had to work harder for money I had already earned. A day passed, and I had time to think and discuss the situation with my crew. Everyone was on the same page, so we decided to walk out together. I called my district manager to address the issue, but he kept declining my calls. Frustrated, I left him a voicemail with a deadline: "You have until 8:45 to call me back, or the entire night crew quits." Fast forward to 7:30, I was watching my boss's email to see if my district manager would communicate with her before calling me. Suddenly, an email notification appeared with the subject line, "Emergency, Lonnie." To my shock, my name was right there in the email. Of course, I had to read it. Long story short, the email was essentially the district manager ensuring that my general manager would be ready to fill in for my abandoned shift, no mention of calling me or paying me my bonus. Fueled by frustration and determination, I gathered my crew, and we walked out, leaving behind a chaotic scene with unfinished tasks and ingredients strewn everywhere. The next day, I turned in my keys and walked away from Wendy's, a place I never thought I'd leave. The story takes a surprising turn when I receive a call from my brother about the district manager's fate. It turned out that Jacob had lost all of his stores and was forced to return to Indiana. If you didn't know, district managers' salaries are tied to the number and success of their stores. When he moved back to Indiana, he took a substantial pay cut, going from a $65,000 salary to a mere $40,000. All this drama, heartache, and defiance was over a measly $250. I'll let that sink in. Revenge, sometimes, tastes so much sweeter.
6 years ago, I was just a greenhorn in the world of construction, picking up a hammer for the first time with no prior experience. But my upbringing instilled in me the belief that hard work and dedication would lead to success. Over the next 2 years, I immersed myself in the construction industry, learning everything I could and going above and beyond my daily duties. This unwavering commitment didn't go unnoticed, and I was swiftly promoted to foreman. Then came the turning point. I was handed the reins of a small project at a sprawling condo complex featuring 12 buildings and 120 units. What started as a modest undertaking led to a pivotal moment in my career. The board of directors for the Homeowners Association, HOA, commended my professionalism, work ethic, and ability to consistently complete projects on time and under budget. Our small project caught their attention, and we ended up winning a significant contract, a pivotal moment that marked the beginning of a new chapter. Fast forward 3 years, and I've become the foreman, superintendent, and project manager, juggling multiple roles to keep the projects on track. From handling billing to conducting meetings with engineers and board members, scheduling, takeoffs, material orders, and even training subcontractors on the application of new materials, my role expanded significantly due to a shortage of mid-management staff. The project's value has now soared to over $2.7 million, and the accolades from the board of directors continue to pour in. They expressed their gratitude for the stability and quality of work that my leadership brought to the table. This ongoing success bolstered my confidence, leading me to approach the owners and ask for the raise they had promised a year ago based on my exceptional performance. However, their response was less than satisfying. They claimed that the experience I was gaining was more valuable than monetary compensation. Realizing my worth, I decided to take action. I made my resume public, which led to an unexpected call from a headhunter. This opportunity proved to be a game changer. I secured an offer that included an impressive $80,000 annual salary, full benefits, 28 days of paid time off, including holidays, an office-based role, finally getting out my truck, a company laptop, in-vehicle Wi-Fi for on-the-go billing during site visits to out-of-state projects, an $80 daily per diem, and a generous 100% matching 401k contribution for the first 3 years of my employment. This was a stark contrast to my current employer, who paid me a mere $40,000 without any of these remarkable benefits. The final straw was when the owners boasted about the substantial profits my project had generated during a company meeting, only to deny me a Christmas bonus. Fed up with the lack of recognition, I handed the offer from my new potential employer to the owners. Their reaction was priceless, their jaws hitting the floor as they absorbed the reality of my departure. In a bold move, I also shared my impending resignation with the HOA board president overseeing the project I was managing. He, too, was concerned about the project's future without my expertise. The company had no one to replace me, and the prospect of proceeding without me at the helm raised serious doubts. It was empowering to realize that, after dedicating 6 years of my life and giving my all, I could finally take a stand for my worth.